listener production.
Hello, Sacha, Barbour-Gatt and Katrina was with you for this bonus episode of The Briefing. Donald Trump has been found guilty in his criminal hush money trial in New York. After 10 hours of deliberation by the jury, the panel of 7 men and 5 women determined the former US president had falsified business records to cover up a payment to adult film star Stormy Daniels before the 2016 election. Following the guilty verdict, we did hear from Trump outside the courtroom. Here is his statement in full.
This was a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt. It's a rigged trial, a disgrace. They wouldn't give us a venue change. We were at 5% or 6% in this district, in this area. This was a rigged, disgraceful trial. The real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people. And they know what happened here, and everybody knows what happened here. You have a Soros-backed DA and the whole thing. We didn't do a thing wrong. I'm a very innocent man. And it's okay. I'm fighting for our country. I'm fighting for our Constitution. Our whole country is being rigged right now. This was done by the Biden administration in order to wound or hurt an opponent, a political opponent. And I think it's just a disgrace. And we'll keep fighting. We'll fight till the end and we'll win because our country's gone to hell. We don't have the same country anymore. We have a divided mess. We're a nation in decline, serious decline. Millions and millions of people pouring into our country right now. From prisons and from mental institutions, terrorists, and they're taking over our country. We have a country that's in big trouble. But this was a rigged decision right from day one with a conflicted judge who should have never been allowed to try this case, never. And we will fight for our Constitution. This is long from over. Thank you very much.
Straight from the Trump playbook, deny, say it was rigged. He brought in the Biden administration, as we heard. He then started spewing out some of his campaign tactics, looking at immigration and illegal immigrants. And it was not what we were expecting this morning, Katrina. The judge had actually said that the jury was going to be dismissed for the day. I went on and checked the CNN live updates that were coming through, and all of a sudden it said, Trump verdict is in. The reading of the verdict is imminent. This is really big news today, Katrina, and could have some really serious implications for the presidential election as well.
Well, the first thing that we're going to notice is we are going to hear an awful lot more from Donald Trump now. Believe it or not, you probably wouldn't believe it from what we have been hearing from him, but Trump has actually been under a gag order. So now he can go and campaign and whip up the MAGA movement even more. As you mentioned, I don't think anyone was expecting this on the second day of deliberations, not even Trump himself. He was laughing and joking with his lawyer right up until the judge left the courtroom. For many people, though, this is going to be extraordinary because of its historical implications, and also because for so many years people have been trying to make something stick on Donald Trump. I mean, this is the guy who's survived 2 impeachments, and now it's taken a trial, which is a state trial in the state of New York. This wasn't a federal trial, despite Trump's narratives that this is somehow a Biden administration ploy to bring him down. It was a state trial, which has ended in a unanimous guilty verdict from this jury.
Yeah. So he had pleaded not guilty to the charges and ended up being found guilty on all 34 of them. And prosecutors had claimed that Trump had tried to cover up the payment to Stormy Daniels by disguising the purpose of the reimbursements, which obviously is a crime. And Katrina, I think what a lot of people would be wondering, us included, is, well, what happens next? And there are a few different outcomes we could see. He has not been led away in handcuffs. As you said, the gag order is lifted. He has walked out of the courtroom and given that statement, and he will remain free until at least his sentencing. Now, that is scheduled for July 11. What's significant about the time of the sentencing is that it is very close to the Republican National Convention. That's happening on the 25th of July, and that is where it is all but certain certain that Trump will be confirmed as the presidential nominee for the Republican Party. At this stage, he's still the presumptive nominee. He has not actually been declared and confirmed as the person running for the Republican Party. Now, will he face time behind bars? It is a possibility. Each of the felony charges that he faced carries a maximum sentence of 4 years. And given how critical Trump was of Judge Juan Merchan throughout the trial, he could be feeling pretty nervous.
Yes and no. The analysis that I've heard over and over again is that it is highly unlikely that Trump will go to jail. I mean, you just got to look at his background. He doesn't have a previous criminal record. He's not a repeat offender. He doesn't have a violent history. Also, what jail would house a former president? I think it's fairly unlikely. And we're not going to know that for sure, as you say, until July 11.
And it is worth noting as well that Trump's legal team have flagged that he will appeal this conviction, but he will have a criminal record now if that appeal isn't successful, isn't upheld. And the interesting thing as well is you mentioned it's a state-based trial. It was brought by New York. And that means that he can't actually, if he does win the election in November and ends up back in office in January, he cannot pardon himself of this because it is not a federal charge. The interesting thing as well is that even if he is sent to jail, as you said, most of the analysis at this stage says there's no way that that will happen. But even if he does end up behind bars, there is nothing that stops him from becoming president even while he is incarcerated. I did speak with Chas Licciardello earlier this year as we were kind of going, oh, well, let's look ahead. The election is this year. What's going to happen? And I did ask him about the trials and how that might impact Trump's ability to run for president. And while he said, well, yeah, he still can run, the problem will be if he's convicted of any of them. And Chas, who is obviously has his show on the ABC and is this great US politics expert, his belief was that a conviction would be a big red line through Trump's hopes of becoming president because he thinks Americans won't vote for him if that happens.
I think, though, many Americans have already made up their mind. I mean, half the people see it one way, half the people see it the other. If you're a Republican, you're very angry about this perceived abuse of criminal justice. You think that it's part of, a systemic abuse to stop Trump becoming president. It really depends on how you view this and how you view democracy and the independence of the judicial system. I think where it's going to come down are those undecided voters. And certainly if you look at history in the last election, it was the senior citizens that were the swinging voters. And given the optics of this particular trial, I mean, it is quite tawdry. It was Trump having an escapade with a porn star and then trying to cover it up. I think it depends on what those senior citizens make of that. It could come down, this election could come down to a few thousand people in a few states.
Also, we can't forget the fact that he's facing 3 other criminal cases. The first one is on whether he illegally conspired to overturn his 2020 election defeat to Joe Biden. Another, Trump and 18 other defendants are accused of criminally conspiring to overturn his very narrow defeat in the state of Georgia in the same election, 2020. And the other one is whether Trump mishandled classified documents by taking them from the White House to his Mar-a-Lago residence after he left office. We don't have dates for any of those cases, and his team is looking to delay any sort of official hearing date being set down because they don't want it to affect his run for president like this one very well could. And we talk a lot, Katrina, about how these criminal proceedings kind of play into Trump's fondness of claiming that, he's being persecuted and there's a left-wing agenda after him and, all these awful people are trying to hunt him down and stop him from, doing the best thing for the country. But as we've discussed, the swing voters are going to prove potentially extremely crucial in this election, and something like a criminal conviction on a presidential hopeful's run sheet isn't going to look good.
Yeah, it depends how well it sits with those people to vote for a convicted felon, which he is now. So I guess looking forward, how Biden is going to react to this will be fascinating. We have heard from him on X, where he's posted, there's only one way to keep Donald Trump out of the Oval Office, at the ballot box. But, you know, at his next press conference, I think Joe Biden is going to need to be very, very measured about this. If he looks like he's gloating, or if he looks like he's trying to use it to his political advantage, he's going to really play into that narrative that he had something to do with it. At home, domestically, it's going to be fascinating to see how Anthony Albanese reacts. This puts him in a really delicate position because this guy could end up becoming president of the United States. We've got AUKUS hanging in the balance. We had Scott Morrison making comments just recently, indicating that he thought it was all a bit of a pile-on. Peter Dutton has reacted this morning. He happened to be on the Today Show, and Karl Stefanovic grabbed him on it, and he said, you know, look, I think this is really fascinating and it's going to make for a really interesting election. But Anthony Albanese is going to need to be a bit more careful with what he says.
Well, we have seen reaction from Trump before in relation to Kevin Rudd, who was going to be an ambassador to the US, and he'd made comments about Trump in the past, and Trump, you know, seemed not open to working with Rudd. So you're right, Albanese is going to have to be very, very careful here. Look, any final thoughts, Katrina, before we wrap up?
Look, depending on how you feel about Trump in your heart, and we are in a cost of living crisis, but if you did want to contribute, they have started fundraising already. No surprises there. And shares of Truth Social, Trump Media and Technology Group, have tumbled 9% in after hours trading. So they are going to need to raise some funds for this appeal.
Katrina, thank you so much for joining us to really unpack everything that we've learnt this morning. There is still lots more to learn, and we will have a further in-depth analysis and reaction in this afternoon's deep dive with Associate Professor David Smith from the United States Study Centre. I'm Sacha Barbour-Gatt, joined by Katrina Blowers. We thank you for listening.
Listener.